This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. I'm Michael Connolly and it is my pleasure to be your host on this journey of basket casey goodness today. Today I've got a story for you that takes me back coming up on 30 years. So this was the late 90s that this story occurred, but it's something that I talk about all the time. And so let me take you back there. At the time, I was still a gigging musician. So that meant that on a Friday night, I'd go and play in a pub, sometimes a Thursday night. So often a Thursday night, for the people who are kind of starting their weekends a bit early. So go and, just standing in a corner playing guitar and singing and generally having a good time and helping other people have a good time. So I'd do that Thursday night and then Friday night. And I think my Friday night gig was, so for those familiar with Queensland geography, Gold Coast. And then the Saturday workshop, so I had a full weekend workshop with a footy club. And it was from Saturday morning at about, I think we had like an 8:30 start. So I've turned up on Saturday morning and I'm knackered to begin with because I've had a late night Thursday night, a late night Friday night and up really early to get home because I lived in Brisbane. So drive from Gold Coast to Brisbane, about an hour home, then Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast, about an hour and a half for where I was going. And started the day and it was a good session. I was 20 something years younger than I am now, so probably looking really fit and healthy as well. And I had this most kick-ass day. So it was old school planning, still doing the butcher's paper around the room with the SWOT analysis on it, and I'll talk about that again, no doubt. And it was good fun. Like everyone was buying in. This was a club that had passion and they'd been through some shit, but they were coming out the other side and things were going well for them. And it was great. But I then had another gig on Saturday night. And I think that one was in northern New South Wales. So I've left everyone there, driven home, packed my car full of my music gear, driven all the way to, I think, Mullumbimby. Then it was a late gig, finished, I think I finished there at midnight, 12:30. And then they were party people. The people who were there at that time, they were party people, so they kept me up. And, well, me not drinking, but them certainly drinking up quite late. Now, the footy club people, we've got the life members, we've got the current committee, we've got members involved. There was, we probably had about 20 people involved in this weekend workshop, and they were a full spectrum of people involved in the club. So really, really good engagement. It was great. Anyway, get back Sunday morning. They're a bit bleary-eyed because they've been out on the piss on Saturday night. I'm a bit bleary-eyed because I've been at another gig on Saturday night and then driven back there to get ready for a 9 o'clock. So I think we had a late start, 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. But we powered back into it. So even though they were a bit hungover and a bit worse for wear, they were still keen to get back into it. So we took everything that we'd done on the Saturday and we were starting to then plot it out on the Sunday, and it was making great headway. By the time we got to finishing up time, we planned to finish about 3:30. By the time we're getting close to wrap up time, things are really starting to come together. We've got really good shape of what the clubhouse needs to achieve. We haven't drawn a clubhouse picture, but we've planned for a new clubhouse. We've got a financial strategy in mind for how to make that happen. And we've got membership growth strategies. We've got diversification of membership strategies happening already. So remember, this is the late 90s and female participation in AFL at the time wasn't huge, but these guys were on it nice and early. They were thinking ahead straight away. So we had some really, really good growth plans ready. And it was about 3 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon that one of the old life members rocks back in his, I remember where he was sitting, we had the big U-shaped table set up. He was sitting over to the back right from where I was looking at him, and he sits back in his chair and goes, "Well, Michael, it's been a lovely couple of days and it's been great hanging around with these bastards again, It's been good to catch up on old times and it's been really good, and it's been really good to talk." And I'm going, this is going well. This is really good. And it's been really good to catch up on some thoughts for the future, It's important that we grow this club, but nothing's going to work. I thought, oh, shit, here we go. And it was at that point that he goes, I said, "What do you mean nothing's going to work?" And it's at that point that he goes, "Well, nothing's going to work because of," and that's when he pointed to the elephant in the room. Now, the elephant in the room at that stage was something like a $90,000 outstanding bill to, I think it was to council for unpaid rates and lease fees and water and stuff. And I thought, that has just derailed a massive weekend for everyone. And you could look around the room and you just see everyone get deflated. It's like, poof, in one pointing at the elephant in the room too late, the wind was blown out of everyone's sails. And it was like, oh man, it was awful. Like it was, and it made it feel like the whole weekend had been a waste. This was a big commitment. You know, they paid me to be there. So there's a financial commitment for us to do the work. They've made a time commitment as well. It was out of season, so they didn't have footy, but we're talking about people who are also involved in swimming and in cricket. It's on the Sunshine Coast. So they're also involved in in lifesaving, in little athletics, in softball. They've given up a whole weekend to plan the next 5 years of their club, and it's at the end that old mate goes, and it's not going to work. And you know what? It's really easy for me to blame the old life member for that. But on reflection, as I often do, driving home, going, what a prick, no, that was freaking awful, what an asshole, blah, 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 blaming him. And I thought, hang on a minute. Was there something that I didn't do that I could have done that could have prevented that? And that was a real wake up for me, because I thought, if I'm going to let it get to the end of a planning session and I haven't asked the difficult questions to uncover the elephants in the room, then whose fault is that? Is that their fault as a club? Is his fault as a life member who's obviously passionate and loves his club? Or is it my fault as a facilitator for not going deep early? So that was the beginning of what I do now, and it's point to the elephant in the room early. Now, I have looked up the etymology of the term elephant in the room. Can't remember it off the top of my head. So there you go. There's something to chat or Google to go and find out. Leaving some homework for you. There you go. But it was something that I learnt that I should have done at the top, not at the end. So now I just go there straight away. So we'll do our welcome. We enjoy each other's company and feel good about being in the room together. But then nice and early, it's a chance to say, is there anything going on in this club that is going to stop us from being able to take the sorts of leaps and bounds that we want to as we get into another planning process? And then just let it sit. So it's amazing how often I'll ask that question and then everyone's, they just sit back. But it's a demonstration that they're all avoiding the elephant in the room. There is always an elephant. I'm going to say that again. There is always an elephant. That elephant might be something to do with, and I might work backwards here. That elephant might be something to do with our programs, the things that we're doing or the things that we're not doing, the things that we're doing, the programs we're running that aren't landing well with our market. What are we doing wrong? Is there that we could have some serious problems on the field here? But it could also be that we are wasting time. So we're spending a whole heap of time still doing the same thing in 2025 that we were in 1999 with this footy club in 1999. So do we not have good systems to guide our operations? Are we still reinventing the wheel? Are we still following a whole heap of manual processes that today should really be automated? Is it a problem with our facilities? So do we have, we're talking about growth, but we just don't have the facilities to grow? Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about it. Because as soon as we start to identify that and say, well, we're at max capacity. If you use one of our formulas that works out that members per field for, say, take this as an AFL club, members per field for an AFL club might max out at about 220. So if you've got more than 220 members, and it's probably a bit more than that for AFL, then can you actually accommodate all of the training and all of the games that you're going to have to fit in during an in-season week with only one field? If not, how can we grow? What can we do in terms of finding a satellite venue? So it could be facilities related. It might be money related, that we don't actually have enough money to do what we're trying to do. Great. Let's put that on the table. Or we might be hemorrhaging money. We might have a lot of debt that nobody's pointing to. We might have a lot of unpaid fees that nobody is pointing to. So let's talk about the money things. It might be a governance failure. So we might be doing quite well when it comes to our on-field performance, but our off-field performance is just crappy. We're long meetings. We've got, like I said, no systems. Our constitution's not doing us any good. Our AGM is always turning into a fight. So there's governance failures. So those are all potential elephants. But the fifth one, and I've left this to last because it can be the most controversial, the elephant in the room could actually be a person. So sometimes we get to a point where people, although they didn't join a club to ruin a club, they've got to the point where they're starting to ruin the club. Everyone joins a club because they want to do what's best for the club. It's not about them, it's about what's best for the club. But over time, things shift, the goalposts move a little bit for them, and they start to behave in a way that's self-serving. Instead of serving the club, it's self-serving. So they might be trying to build a political career, for instance. They might want to move from being president of the footy club to then going and being president of the Chamber of Commerce, and then I'm going to be mayor, and then Prime Minister. Okay, fine. But if that's why you're here, how is that serving your community? That's not good. You've got to be here for the right reason, and sometimes over time, people stop being here for the right reason. How do you move people on when the elephant in the room is a person? Well, it can be really tricky. But it comes down to and in fact, dealing with any elephant comes down to having some good conversations. The first one is to identify, hey, we do have some problems here and we're going to need to solve those problems before we look at what the next step is. So let's deal with the big things, the elephants in the room first, and then we'll go into get into the more technical things, like all of those things about new facilities, new clubhouses, new irrigation systems, upgraded lighting. All of those things can fall into place, but not if we've got some elephants in the room that are the problem. So if the elephant in the room is a person, then you've got to start by having the conversation. Don't go up to them and say, hey, you're a big fat elephant in the room and we want you out. It's about having a discussion about why they're involved. This is something else that I've now taken away from that experience where I go at the elephants in the room nice and early. Let's get that out of the way. Is there anything going on in this club that's going to stop you from being able to participate actively in this session so that we can be thinking about the future, 3 or 5 years in the future from now? But when we then find out that there might be some of those problems, it's a matter of then having a discussion about why we're here. So if the problem is a person, have a discussion about why we all joined. And it's something that I'll also do in a planning session. Let's get connected to what it is about this club that makes us want to be here, because we can then focus on that. If you're starting to hear that, even from those elephants in the room, the people who might have outstayed their welcome, you might start to hear some things about, oh, well, I'm only going to be here for a little while more, and I want to then move on to the next thing in my career. Well, maybe that's the time to say, well, when's that going to happen? What's going to make that the right time? And who's going to take over from you? What are the attributes of the person who's going to be next? And start to have that succession planning discussion. If things get really bad, sometimes you do need to sack a volunteer. It's difficult. It's never fun, but you may need to address the problem significantly and say, I'm seeing these sorts of, and always talk about the behavior, not the person. I'm seeing these sorts of behaviors and I'm seeing them have this sort of negative impact on the club. What are we going to do about that? Typically, in reality, that's going to lead to a fight. Well, hopefully it won't lead to a fight, but it's potentially and likely some backlash. And because self-awareness is one of those very rare commodities, the person might say, hang on a minute, you're like you and you and you, and turn it around. But at least you've opened the conversation. It's unlikely you're going to get to a resolution in one go. Sometimes it's bad enough where you do need to move someone. If they've done something serious, like you need to terminate their membership, then it can be serious enough. But if it's just one of those things, have a conversation, but have a conversation by asking lots of questions. What's the most important thing about you, about being here for you right now? And you can keep bringing it back to right now, because while it might have been to help my kids grow in the sport 15 years ago, well, the kids have all grown up and they're not here now. And the ideas that you're coming up with are still embedded in a world that was 15 years ago, but it's very different from now. This person might be holding you back from having an active social media presence. They might be holding you back from diversifying your programs, even diversifying your committee or your board. So that's the time to start having those discussions. It's never simple. There's never a one-size-fits-all approach. But regardless of what the elephant is, start to point to it. Start to say, we actually have this significant issue. Unless we deal with that, we're not going to be able to take the big steps that we want to. So don't leave the elephants in the room until 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, especially if you're bleary-eyed and tired from either being at a gig like I was or being out on the piss like they were. If the problem is something that's to do with your operations and your programs, something to do with your facilities, something to do with money, or something to do with governance, it's very tactical. So just look at the steps and then deal with the steps. But most likely there'll be a people element to that as well. If it's a people problem, then deal with it sensitively, but don't leave it an elephant in the room for the next generation. This is what can happen, and why it was this life member who brought it up, because we just sit on things and we don't deal with them, hoping that they'll go away. But from a conflict management perspective, that's called avoidance, and it's never effective in the long term. So you're going to have to address it. So start addressing it. Take those steps that are going to point to the elephant in the room and then deal with the elephant in the room. So thank you very much for joining us today. I think that's probably enough. There's a bit in there for you to digest, but I want you to think about what are some elephants in the room that you've been sitting on. Send us a message. I'd love to know what sorts of elephants you're avoiding. Let's get that conversation going, because there's other people in the community that I guarantee will have exactly the same problem. So if you've had a problem and you've solved it, share that. If you've got a problem and you're wondering how to solve it, ask that. Thanks, of course, to Jess for being our wonderful editor and producer. If you're not already following us on social media, make sure you do so. You'll get me at NFPMichael, and jump onto cprgroup.com.au to make sure you signed up for our newsletter to keep up to date with everything that's going on in the world of CPR Group. Thanks for joining me on Basket Case Clubs. I look forward to seeing you next time. Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.